So I really hope that you're as excited as I am for this panel. So what we're going to do is these folks don't have slides, so they're going to speak from where they are. So I'll just we're going to start with Paul Valder, who's the Director of Business Development for BRC, and I think you will take it away and set the stage for us, and then we'll continue on. Thanks.
Good morning. Thank you. And thanks for inviting me today and everybody on our panel. It's great to be here. This has been a 10-year contribution for me, going on 10 years with CCA, so I'm not new. A lot of familiar faces here today. So I just wanted to welcome everybody to the meeting today, too. Those of you that don't know, I started out in the food safety consulting business many years ago. And one of my clients was the Canadian Celiac Association. At that time, they wanted to develop a standardized approach to informing consumers about foods that they could purchase and feel comfortable, safe, and consistent in the market in Canada. And so we started to develop a program called the Gluten-Free Certification Program, which I'm sure you're familiar with. 10 years later, it's morphed into a global standard recognized by various accreditation bodies, celiac organizations around the world, and we're really proud to say that it's viewed as the gold standard for certification of manufacturing processes and facilities. And those companies and brands that want to actually make a declaration that their product is gluten-free. So we're really happy this initiative couldn't have happened without the support of the wide stakeholder groups that we had, including Health Canada, CFIA, all the consumer groups and industry groups. So this was a consensus-based approach to this, and continues to be that today. New issue 3 is coming out into the market. Manufacturers will be audited to issue 3 commencing August 1st. And we had, again, tremendous stakeholder involvement in evolving to issue number 3. All the major brands and manufacturers, retailers around the world, both in Canada, US, and in Europe. So very exciting. We're in the process of standardizing the approach and gaining acceptance from the European Celiac Organization Association, so some 28 countries, including Celiac UK, Australia, New Zealand, and Mexico. So it's all very exciting in terms of where it's all going. What I did want to sort of open today with is our job is definitely not done. There's still a tremendous amount of confusion by consumers who are purchasing gluten-free products in terms of what symbols, claims, and these statements really mean. We have programs that are what we call accredited programs. We have non-accredited programs. We have self-declarations and marks that mean absolutely nothing on packaging today. So the challenge that I'd like to put out today to everybody is how can we provide more, I guess, more rigors around how consumers, what consumers receive on packaging. And I know Mike Abbott's here from Health Canada. Maybe that's something we can also talk to Health Canada about. Is I've been just commissioned by GS1 Canada, in fact, to help to streamline and help create some standard of understanding about what all these different marks and claims mean. So if we're talking about mislabeling on products, I would say that there's a job still to be done in terms of gluten-free claims on products, what's allowed, what isn't allowed, the marketing exception rules, and so on. How does that contribute to making things more confusing or making things easier? So these are all the kinds of issues that we look to kind of work towards as we try to continually improve the standards for certification. So that's what I'd just like to open with and challenge everybody with today.
Thank you very much. Now, would you like to just pass it down?
Sure.
Okay, so this is Joel Wardy, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of Enjoy Life Foods.
Thank you. So one of the things we were asked to do was to give you a little bit of history about our company and how we became where we are today. How many people in this room are familiar with Enjoy Life Foods? See, it's great talking to an association like this because sometimes I go to places and people have never heard of you. Enjoy Life Foods has been around for 18 years. And what's interesting, it started as a class project. There were two bankers in Chicago who were getting their MBA, and they were procrastinators, and they had no idea. The idea was that they had to come up with a business plan to submit, not to create a business, just to create a business plan. And they had no idea. And one of the bankers, his mother has multiple sclerosis, and her doctor had recommended that she be on a gluten-free, casein-free diet. And so they thought, well, okay, that'll be our idea. We'll write a business plan for a gluten-free business. And they got an A. And then they thought, well, you know what, maybe there's a business here. And so they got their MBAs, they were both still working for the bank, and they wanted to create this as a company. But they were bankers, and bankers don't know how to do anything other than hold money back or give money out. One of those bankers was my banker, and I used to own a toothbrush company. So they came to me because that is natural, right? Toothbrushes are gluten-free. No. So they came to me and they said, can you help us? And that's how I got involved. And I remember the very first advisory meeting, there were people there who had celiac disease, there were gastro people, and I had no idea what celiac disease. I had never heard of it, and I had to start doing my research. And so that was 18 years ago. I've been fortunate in that I've been involved with the company since the inception, first as an advisor and then in various roles. And today I run the business. We were acquired by Mondelez in 2015. So Mondelez, for those of you who are Canadian, that is Christie's. For those of you in the US, that's Nabisco. They make all those really healthy products like Oreo, and we'll talk about that in a second. So when we started this business, there were other gluten-free companies out there, and so what we decided from day one was to be gluten-free plus. We found out that the FDA in the States had designated 8 allergens as being the top 8 allergens, and we said, well, we won't just be gluten-free, we're gonna be gluten-free plus free of the top 8 allergens. And it's great when you don't know anything about the food business. We didn't realize how hard that was, but we did it. And so from day one, that has been our brand promise. Now, some people, we've always been snack foods. We used to do bread really poorly, not as good as Jerry did. Our bread was like we did bread and bagels, and our bagels were like hockey pucks. They weren't, and so we got out of that. But you know, why do we do just snack foods? Because part of what we're about is bringing happiness and celebration back into people's lives. You know, food is such an emotional part of what we do every day. And so when we know people have to be on a gluten-restricted or gluten-free diet, we want to bring that celebration back in. So we do focus on snack foods. We don't do any frozen. We don't do any fresh. It is snack food. It is processed, but we like to say it's lightly processed because if you came through our facility, we are putting ingredients in a mixer, although it's larger, and we bake it in an oven. It is no different than what you're doing at home today. We just do it in larger batches. But so how did we become as big as we are? So when I got involved with the company full time, I was advising the company for a number of years, and then in 2011. I joined the company full time, and one of the things that I saw is that most gluten-free companies were focused on the natural channel, the independent natural food stores, kind of, you know, on the periphery. And I said, this is going to be much bigger. So I went and we we focused on all the conventional supermarkets. And what we said to the conventional supermarkets was, gluten-free, there's a real need out there, and you need to put products on your shelf. And when we first started talking to them, they didn't really understand what we were talking about. They just didn't see how big it was going to be, but that was our job, was to show them. And so while many of our competitors were focused on the natural side, we decided to go conventional. It allowed us to grow. Canada has been a big part of our growth. It represents 11% of our total business, so it over-indexes what we do in the States. And today, we like to say from the allergy-friendly standpoint that we're the largest brand on allergy-friendly. Obviously, there are a lot of gluten-free companies. And by the way, we use the term gluten-free, and then we personally created the term allergy-friendly. We think it should have been gluten-friendly because it's not free of gluten, right? You're testing, we're testing down to 5 parts per million gluten, which means there is some gluten. And that's one of the things we always tell our consumers. So consumers tend to call us and say, well, I ate your product and I got sick. And we probe. So, we'll always ask, what product did you eat? We get the lot numbers and everything. And one of the things that they'll say is, well, I was eating your Snickerdoodle cookies. We say, great. How many did you eat? Oh, I ate the whole box. Okay, that's why you're sick. And that is part of the problem is, consumers think if it says gluten-free, it doesn't matter how much you eat, it's going to be free of gluten, and that's not true. So we try and help people understand that, especially newly diagnosed who are just searching for answers. I do want to talk about certification since Paul brought it up. We are big believers in certification. We happen to be certified by the GFCO, the Gluten-Free Certification Organization. One thing I will say about the GFCO and about our certification is the GFCO certifies, according to them, about 26% of all gluten-free products around the world. Over 2,000 companies, over 20,000 products. The very first product that was ever certified by the GFCO was Enjoy Life. So when they decided to get into the certification business, we helped them create the standards. In the States, the FDA says that you can call your product gluten-free if it tests 20 parts per million or less. We think 20 is too high. And there's a lot of reasons why it was set at 20. Mostly because Big Food lobbied for that, because it was easier. By being GFCO certified, you have to test 10 parts per million or less, a little bit more stricter. And because we sell our products in Australia and New Zealand, we have to test down to 5 parts per million. So we test all of our products down to 5 parts per million of gluten. But one of the things that you have to be careful as a manufacturer is when you're testing those inbound ingredients, is making sure that the inbound ingredients are testing that low as well. Because what some companies will do is they'll use ingredients that test higher than 20 parts per million, but when the finished product is done and it tests less than 20 parts, they'll call it gluten-free, but you can have spikes. So for example, we went through a period of time where we were having some difficulty with sorghum flour, and we were finding spikes of gluten in sorghum flour. And so we kind of moved away from sorghum for a while, went to buckwheat and millet. Has its own problems because you have people that are allergic to buckwheat and millet. But it wasn't until we found a grower, a farmer, who really could make certain that his sorghum was testing at the levels that we needed to test, that we moved back to sorghum, which we did about 2 years ago. So testing is a big part. We test all of our inbound, we test all of our outbound, and then we test in the middle. And then the last thing, and we'll have time later for Q&A, is the subject of oats. So for years, we never allowed oats in our facility. There was a lot of question about oats. And certainly in Canada, you couldn't call yourself a gluten-free company if you had oats in the facility. But when that was relaxed, we decided to test certain oats. Today, we buy Purity Protocol oats from Canada. We buy 4 types of Purity Protocol oats. Is that right, 4 types? Yep, I think we do, yes. You know, we make certain that all of the oats are testing gluten-free as well. So that's kind of the quick overview of Enjoy Life, but when we get to the end, I'll be happy to answer questions.
So are you, you're next? Okay, so this is Mike Marshall, who is the Chief Operating Officer of West Oak Naturals Incorporated and Only Oats. So since we're talking about oats.
Great segue. So thanks for the invitation to the CCA, Meredith. Thank you, Melissa and Mark for organizing everything, sending out the notes for us. I'm really excited to get into discussion with everybody, and I'm really happy to be part of this panel. Very much great tee-off with discussing Purity Protocol oats. I guess before we get going, by show of hands, we'll be a little bit interactive with my little talk here, so you won't fall asleep. Who knows about Only Oats? Oh, that worked out all right. Who's familiar with Purity Protocol oats? Well, my session's done. One thing's for sure, I don't have a doctor title in front of my name. I got my master's in BS from BSU, over 18 years of work in ag and food. I was part of the Avena company. I was one of the original owners. So I was involved in that business. I brought the organic program to Avena. So in that, about 10 years ago, the Only Oats brand was born from a group of producers, and they really started the mill to produce a safe gluten-free oat. And they basically come up with the Purity Protocol, and which really is a grower-based model that is to produce a gluten-free oat and to protect that gluten-free oat through the whole process, through the mill, into the package, and then on to ingredients, as ingredients to other bars, cereals, what have you. Within that, it was really interesting to me when I got involved, and I think I'm going to quote Simon Sinek. Maybe some of you have heard his TED Talks, or he's an author and organizational consultant, and he professes what's called the golden circle. And as I was contemplating some of the points that we wanted to discuss to try to advance things within the gluten-free community, I thought this was important to maybe bring up today, so it'll help us spur on, like, what can we collectively do, and how do we organize, and what does that look like? So I'm just going to read it so I don't screw it up. Every organization knows what they do. These are all products they sell or services they offer. Some organizations know how they do it. This what makes them special or unique and sets them apart from their competition. So very few organizations know why they do what they do. Why is not about making money. Making money is the result of why they do it. It is the purpose, the cause, or the belief of why they do it. It's the very reason that your organization exists. And he ends by saying, people do not buy your product or service because of what it is or how you make it. They buy it because of why you made it. And I think that's very true for every company here, for every individual that's here in this panel and probably within this room. But I think as we go through the tables and ask questions and give feedback, I think we all have to come back to our why. Why do we do this? And I want to just discuss my why. So when Manny Sabaris asked me to join the business in October, I very much wanted to be part of it, not just because I think it's a great brand and it's got a great runway. I have a daughter, one of 5. My youngest daughter struggled terribly when she was a baby coming on to eating solid food. She would eat rice pablum, about 4 months old, and we would have to rush her to the emergency room. And this happened 3 times. The 4th time, finally, we her 4 times taking a catatonic little, white baby that's vomiting profusely is a little bit off-putting. And we just didn't know what the problem was. And we had a diagnosis after that. She was diagnosed with FPIES. Now, we've had to go through the gauntlet of, what makes her sick. And, frankly, we asked the doctor, like, well, what do we do here? Like, how do we know? Well, you roll the dice. You feed her and make sure you're close to an emergency room if you're going to try something new. Wow, great. That was the process. And, I've been in the food industry for a long time, and I know the process from beginning to end, and pretty much every product that's out there. I've been into numerous plants, milling facilities, ran milling facilities. So it brought this question to me, like, so how do I know? If I don't physically have my hand in every part of this, how do I know what my daughter's consuming? So that became kind of my why. So in working with the Purity Protocol gluten-free oats and knowing the crop rotations, and I knew everything from the planting seed to the 3 years of field history to the equipment that was being used on the farm. I knew right to the mill, and at every point through the mill, I knew this is, the precautions we take to not just be under the 20 parts per million or under the 10 that we were certified to, but the goal was to be at not detectable or 0. So I knew what went into that package. So Only Oats sustained my daughter's life basically up till she was 18 months and she was able to tolerate some other solid foods. So for me, that is my why, and it expands a lot. It doesn't mean that my daughter can relate to celiac, but there is really no correlation that I know of other than it's an autoimmune disease. But I do know that there needs to be something there, and those maybe that have heard me speak before, trust in food is really, that's for every human with a mouth, that's what means something. And I think to tie this all together and kind of, if you're familiar with the brand, I won't bore you with the goings on, but I just want to kind of open this up, So what I'd like to do is maybe just get some feedback just for my own, I know that we have regulation that states that we need to be testing, we have to show under 20 parts per million. But, as consumers of our product, I'm very curious to know, where is the threshold of comfort, just by a show of hands, is if it's not an oat product or if it's just a packaged product or good or baked good, by a show of hands, is less than 20 parts per million a safe range in your opinion? No. Okay, so less than 10. Okay, show of hands. Okay, so not detectable. So should that not this is a rhetorical question, and I think I just want to ask it to open it up to the whole. I understand the difficulties with production. I've been involved with all of it. But I'm asking this because I want to understand, like, where is the bar? What is the acceptable bar? So if that's the case, you know, should we, this is just for consideration and discussion later, but should we not set the bar low and then qualify high risk ingredients? Not from a finished good standpoint, but as an ingredient. If we start stacking ingredients, like we said, like the comment that you know, there's blending so that we can stay with under the threshold, well, there's a couple ways or reasons why that's done, right? That, you know, save cost and to make your supply chain a little bit easier to access. So from an ingredient perspective, like how do we weigh that? And that's actually my question to you, because I don't know. Because like I said, I don't have a doctorate in anything. So this is another point that I wanted to ask, just generally speaking, not as a celiac community or gluten-free community. It just happens to be probably 1 out of every 3 emails we get. So just by a show of hands, who has concerns of GMOs? Okay. Who has concerns about glyphosate residue? Yeah, sorry. The trade name is Roundup. Okay, so who thinks they're the same thing? GMO and Roundup or glyphosate? Okay, so very educated people here. We get so many questions about this, and again, this really links back to the trust in food piece. So I just wanted to make this statement, because I know it's going to go on Facebook, and we communicate this all the time, but our policy, it's like since 2014, glyphosate has not been allowed to be used as a pre-harvest burn-off on any of our products, our oats, and thus like all of our products are a composite sample of every field is done every year, and since 2014 we've not had any residue found in the oats. So I just wanted to kind of address that, because these seem to be a lot of the questions that we get in our emails to our info inbox. And kind of lastly, we get so many different questions, and I want to, again, by a show of hands, I just want to ask this just for maybe to spur discussion and probably more for my knowledge, but when you're looking at a gluten-free oat brand or products in general, like we discussed, what, you know, by show of hands, is the certification the only thing that you look at when you buy a product? Okay. Do you buy a product because of the history of the brand in relative to gluten-free and the trust that you have in that brand? Or mistrust? As a community, do you buy a product because of word of mouth from other people in the community? So I learned this from my partner, Manny. He's been a marketing guru for many A-list companies. And you know, word of mouth is the strongest brand recognition that you can get. And I think we live in a time where this is actually probably available to everybody at the touch of a fingertip, because we take our phones everywhere. So I would just like to maybe end my little piece here just by saying, you know, as a group, if we are comfortable with a brand, a product, I think it's important to share that. I think it's important to share that in person. I think it's important to share that on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Pinterest. And the reason I'm really saying that is, as CCA as a group, although that's been utilized, I think that's probably the cheapest, most effective way to get the message to each person in the community. And I think that's probably a place to start. Like, how do we, promote each other? Like speaking and saying, that enjoy life, that's good stuff. The bread that I'm buying from Jerry's company is fantastic. Only Oats is great. This thing on? So anyways, point being, I think, supporting each other is very important. We're here to support the CCA. It's very important to us, and we know that money's not the end all be all, but that's what's going to drive research. That's what's going to drive a lot of the things we do. And, for us, like Enjoy Life Foods, we would like for you, when you're at the grocery store and you don't see the brand and you feel like that it should be there because that's where you do your shopping, talk to the store manager. And I mean, those kind of things, what we're going to do is increase the volume so we can bring the price down, because really that's, in end, we want to be able to feed as many people healthy, trusted food as we can at a reasonable price. Thanks.
Okay, and so our final panelist is Jerry Bigham, who's the president and CEO of Kinnikinnick, which I've always just read off the label. So did I say that right?
That's very good.
Okay,
Yes,
fantastic.
You just have to let it roll. It's a name you can't spell and you can't pronounce, but you remember. So we have a lot of fun with folks in Tennessee and Mississippi when they try to get their name around the Kinnikinnick. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to the CCA, and it's good to see everyone here. I'm going to take a little different approach, if you don't mind. I don't have any, well, I have notes now, but mainly coming from this morning's panel. I thought was a very interesting panel for those of us in the food industry, obviously. What the technology is doing has direct bearing on our futures and all that sort of thing. So we have some very, very strong interest in what's happening there. I've also just wanted to mention that I have a commercial side, which is Kinnikinnick Foods, but I also have a personal interest side. My wife was diagnosed with celiac disease 35 years ago, and she was diagnosed after the birth of our second child, when we think the first child was triggered her the celiac disease. She almost died and was fortunately diagnosed, and then one way or another, we got involved with a small company in Edmonton, 6 people, and started making gluten-free food, because it was the only food we could find that you could eat in those days. We became the first company to put food on the web, and so for 28 years we've been operating an online site for 28 years, and used it to grow our business by building a brand throughout North America. So that's been that was sort of the start of our interest in gluten-free food. Also, a couple of other things coming from this morning's discussion. There were some questions about what triggers celiac disease and how do these things happen? What's the science behind it? And I know that my son, his was triggered by pneumonia, a bad case of viral pneumonia. My granddaughter got hamburger disease, was triggered by that. My other grandson, don't know, it just happened. So no pattern except stressing the immune system appears to be what really triggered the events. So I have obviously a strong personal interest. I got nieces and nephews and grandkids, and you name it, they all rely on gluten-free food. So we have a personal interest in seeing that we make the best food possible, and I think we've been trying to do that for quite a few years. I also would just support what Joel was saying about testing and so on. We have a lab of 5 people. We test every ingredient that comes into our plant for all allergens, not just gluten, but for dairy, for soy, for peanuts and tree nuts. We're just switching over everything to get rid of eggs so that we'll soon be totally free from. At the moment, we're free from everything except eggs. And part of that came from originally back 20-some years ago when we were doing gluten-free. We had autistic parents contact us about, can you do gluten-free and dairy-free, because it has an impact on our kids' behavior. And make a long story short, that was the start of our first progression into not just gluten-free but dairy-free. And then over the years, it's like, well, you're making gluten-free, dairy-free. Couldn't you make it peanut and tree nut-free? And I said, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And then recently we took soy-free, and so half of our products are completely free of everything, all the allergen, except including eggs. And we're still working on the last 20 products over the next 18 months, and there will shortly be a complete rebrand called Free From. So it's obviously starts with gluten-free, but it'll also affect all those people with other allergens. And those people have the same issues that all of you do, which is you read labels. And it's important that they get the same kind of food safety that you get. People obviously with peanut allergies read labels very carefully because it has a major impact immediately. So that's certainly the direction that our company's in. As I say, we test everything, all the incoming ingredients down to 5 parts per million, which is the lowest testing result. You can't get anything below that. So that means that if we have a positive test, we don't use the ingredients. You can't imagine the difficulty that you find in the supply chain of sourcing a product that's gluten-free, dairy-free, peanut-free, tree nut-free, soy-free. It's a massive problem of selection and testing. The question is interesting. You mentioned about sorghum. We developed a new product, a new pancake mix using sorghum, and then we found that we had so much contamination from 5 different suppliers that we discontinued the product. So if anybody wants 30,000 American and 30,000 Canadian empty boxes, I got them for you. So those are real restrictions on when you make a commitment to food safety that intense. It's a big challenge, and it's one of the reasons why your food costs more money. I mean, we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every year on simply food testing, and you would be surprised at the amount of contamination we get in products that come from manufacturers that say no wheat in the system, no wheat on the lines, no wheat. Gee, it tests positive for 60, 70 parts per million. It's one of the reasons we can't use things like garlic powder, for example. Mostly garlic powder comes in from China, and it's contaminated not with gluten, but with peanuts. But you do get that kind of contamination. And the same with seasonings. We've had a number of seasoning companies that say our seasonings are perfectly safe, and they send us samples, and we test them, and they're 40, 60, 70, 80 parts per million. Now, we could use those because dilution is a solution, is an issue, but we just simply don't go that way. So we just simply don't use some items which we would like to, but they're simply not worth it in the food safety aspect. So then I'd like to maybe just move on from our own corporate issues and talk a little bit about the industry as such and the way it's changing. And I think that's something that should be really important to all of you. Over the last 8-10 years, gluten-free sales have been 10-15% annually in the marketplace. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon, everybody in the retail side of things. Then the gluten intolerant, not fad, it's not a fad, but the gluten intolerant group came on with athletes and actresses and promoting gluten-free as a weight loss. Could you imagine that? A weight loss for gluten-free. Anyways, so a lot of those people have fallen off the wagon, and the result is that the gluten-free market is dropping. And what the importance of that is that the retailers are becoming less excited about gluten-free. What they're doing is they're restricting, they're eliminating products, they're restricting your selection. So that's going to be a significant change. You've really been enjoying walking into a retail store and there's 5 different breads and you've got a nice selection. Wait till you see what's coming around the corner in Canada, particularly, where you're going to have maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, but more likely 1 or 2, and the selection is going to get much more restricted. One of the big questions, one of the big issues that you should think about is in your social media programs. There are 2 or 3 buyers in Canada that are effectively deciding which products hit your shelves, whether it's in Sobeys or Loblaws or Overweighty or Walmart, and those buyers really don't sample products very often. They really don't know what's a good product, what's a bad product. You had better think about using your social media to contact some of these companies and get your message across, because the lines are going to be restricted. So you really better get your oar in to see that the products that you really enjoy are ending up on the shelf. Otherwise, you're going to find products that you really don't like, but you don't have any choice, and you won't be able to find a lot of these products anywhere else. So that's one of the big issues. The other major issue, which I think doesn't get as much attention as it should be, is that lots of interest in gluten-free. Lots of people want to jump in gluten-free. So what do? You go to a co-packer and you have a co-packer make products for you. Then they put a gluten-free label on it, and they make it in the same plant that makes conventional foods. And I can tell you that a little bit of dust from an associated line is more than sufficient to put your product over the 20 parts per million. And I see our representative from Dr. Shar is nodding in agreement. It's a big issue so people jumping in and without the food safety standards. That's one of the issues that came up this morning, is where does this incidental contamination come from? Surprise, surprise. Part of it comes from the lack of food safety standards that are nobody tests like we test, we being the gluten-free industry, that are central. I mean, Dr. Shar and Enjoy Life, all and ourselves, we do everything we can to make sure that you got the safest food possible. Interestingly enough, from our perspective, and I got 2.5 minutes, we've actually dramatically expanded our online business. We currently sell on Amazon, and as everybody else does, but our online business has been expanded dramatically because a lot of people are complaining about, I can only get this here and I get that there. I got to go to 3 stores. So our online business in the last 3 months has doubled, and we would expect that to become even more of an important part as the sets in the retail stores get more limited. It's going to be one of the ways that you can get buy everything you want, sort of one-stop shopping instead of traipsing around the city. So I think that's the other question that came out, another point I would like to make on from this morning's discussion. The question came up about the incidence of celiac disease, growing, and we see that clearly from emails and comments from consumers. But the other issue is in the free-from business, you see that it's growing not just in gluten-free, but it's growing free in other allergens. And of course, we all, I think, are aware of the autistic situation in terms of it appears to be more autistic kids around, and they're everywhere. So there's something, whether it's environmental or diet-wise or whatever, but clearly there's something happening out there that's going to require more of the kinds of foods that we make, because more and more people are susceptible to not only the allergies but the celiac disease. So I think those are some trends that are a little disconcerting. The gluten-free consumer, I think, has had a pretty good run of much better products over the last 10 years. And there is another, I suppose, consideration which is out there, and is that most of the industry has now, it used to be all family companies like ourselves, Vida perhaps, and Enjoy Life, and Dr. Shar, are all companies that started from someone in the family or something like that associated with celiac disease. Today, most of the companies are owned by major corporations, and the question for all of us will be how much of a commitment to that part of the conglomerate does gluten-free have? If you've got a $12 billion or $15, $20 billion company, do you really care too much about what's happening in new product development in the celiac portion? So that's another unknown. Different companies will respond differently. I can tell you that Mondelez does a good job of expanding the Enjoy Life brand. But there are other trends out there which will be sort of in a different direction, which may see some of the food you're currently getting from other companies, larger companies, which may or may not be there in the next coming months. Again, another question about make sure that you use your platform to talk to the retailers about what do you want to see in the stores. That's really a big deal, because this, I mean, buyers really don't care a lot about anything but what's the price, what's the margin, does it taste good? It's okay. It's gluten-free. They'll eat it. That's really we don't want to deal with those kind of subjects anymore. We don't make cardboard or block bread anymore, as Joel said years ago. Yeah. So that's it. Thank you. And
Who have IgE-mediated allergy versus celiac patients?
Yeah, it's a great question. Today, we're actually free from 14 allergens because we sell into the EU, and the EU recognizes 14 allergens. What makes it most difficult for us, because we start there, where all of our products are free from 14 allergens, as well as certified gluten-free, there are some products that we do not feel we can make that will taste good. Because the fact is, taste is number one. People have to consume a product that they like. So that helps us determine, what we will be producing based on what we can find out there from an ingredient supplier. We've done a lot of surveys with our consumers, and I thought it was interesting this morning because our surveys tell us something different in that 72% of all of our consumers who buy gluten-free have one additional allergen. But that could be because they're buying our product. And so, we have a skewed database. But so we know that people are gluten-free plus something else. But the fact is, if they don't have a peanut allergy, they don't care about being free from peanuts. They care about being free from dairy. So we address that with each person. But we test for everything. So all inbound ingredients are tested not only for gluten, but for all of the 14 allergens. We test during process, and then we test on the back end with finished product. And by the way, one other thing that we do from a testing standpoint is we keep retention samples for 18 months. Mm-hmm. So if someone 6 months later says, I have a problem with your product, we then do two things. We test it in our in-house lab. We also test it in a third-party lab to make certain that, in fact, it doesn't have gluten or any other allergen.
Okay, thank you. So there's a question here.
In your previous question, you just differentiated between wheat-free, i.e. meeting the allergen standard, and gluten-free. Should there really be a difference? I mean, I recognize that gluten-free is broader than wheat-free, but, if it's gluten-free, should it not be as equal to being an allergy-free?
Well, I think the simple answer there is gluten covers obviously more than wheat. It's a convention that people understood wheat-free they understood that. You never see barley.
Sorry, let me rephrase that. Should the standard for gluten-free be the same as the standard for wheat-free or dairy-free or peanut-free, i.e. not detectable?
You're talking about what should the parts per million be the same count?
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
regulatory, they're separate.
Well,
Should they be, in your experience as manufacturers?
We would not treat them any differently, and you got to be careful. Non-detectable means not below a certain standard. The test kits only go down to a certain level. So down to that level, yes, not detectable, and absolutely wheat-free and gluten-free should be the same or opposite side of the coin, I guess.
Does anyone on the panel see it any differently?
Well, the concern I would have with that is if you have an allowable limit of 20 parts per million, and you're testing to under 10, and you have a peanut, and you test it to under 10, it's still going to possibly have severe impact on somebody that's allergic to nuts.
Well, we would never use
exactly.
never use a standard that high, though.
Right. I think
Even 5.
Yeah, for clarification, on allergens,
Yeah.
we test down to non-detectable.
Yeah.
In gluten, as Jerry said, the tests are 5 parts per million. We have not been able, if we could find tests that allow us to test down to 0, we certainly would utilize that.
Yeah.
They don't exist right now.
And
So-
typically, the standards for dairy and for soy and for peanuts are closer to 2 ppm or slightly lower, depending on so the test kits do vary, but we always test down to the lowest possible level.
You do, but other manufacturers may not be as diligent. Should they have that wiggle room? Is the real question.
So just to get that into a microphone, so the question is, maybe you test at that level of diligence, but not every manufacturer does because they're not forced to conform to standards. And so your question is, should the standards say that? That also sounds like something we should check in with at the regulatory panel, right? Just in terms of enforcing that. So we're getting the manufacturer's take on it right now from a subset of manufacturers, right?
And not to deflect anything from there, because it's primarily for gluten, but there are no standards for the other allergens. We have been after Health Canada for 5 or 6 years to give us some standards that which we can measure. So since we have no standards, we test down to the lowest possible levels, and below that, you can't, what can you do? So.
Okay, thanks. There's another question here.
Are brands transitioning to allergen-free more of an indication that they're just trying to expand their market and not that there's a correlation of food allergies and celiac?
So you're asking, is the
Like a lot of brands
confluence
are,
of.
yeah, a lot of
Right.
brands are no longer just focusing on gluten-free, they're becoming allergen-free. This is just to expand their market because they're losing shelf space, and not an indication that people with celiac have a higher prevalence of food allergies.
So to your point, to your question, there's definitely a trend to doing that, to meet consumer demands, basically. And so, as Jerry mentioned earlier, look out for a reduction in gluten-free products. I would maybe question that slightly in that the gluten-free products will be disguised as, free from or allergen-free or other types of claims where gluten would be absent by default. Yes, to your point, I think they're trying to also capture a broader market, not specifically addressing a celiac concern.
And this will sound somewhat arrogant. I think we created part of the problem at Enjoy Life because we were the first brand that was free from all of the allergens, and we got on shelf. And so then everyone else who looked at it said, well, there's a market. And so we kind of blazed the trail. We're happy that others have followed because it does create a real category. And I think it benefits everybody.
This morning, or earlier, Dr. Leffler, I think it was you who said that there was a 25% co-incidence of if you have celiac, you've got a 25% chance of having another food allergy. But is that higher than the general population?
Yeah, it is somewhat higher.
It's a little higher. Okay, thanks.
So if I could just speak to that just from a market perspective. I don't think we make that decision with our brand based on we think that this is a growing segment. I think it's more or less if we can offer something that is an add-on to our already secure oat. Our market's everyone with a mouth. It's not just specifically this community. You know, this is a community that's grown this brand and trusted this brand, and we're going to continue on with that. But really, as Jerry was saying, you know, speaking to the grocery chains and letting them know that this is an important part of your buying decisions, whether it's our product or the other gluten-free products, is very key, because the more of the conventional market that accepts the brand, like the Enjoy Life Foods, then it becomes a market. And I'm not saying that we are doing this on purpose to create a market. Like I said, everyone with the mouth is the market. So, you know, it's about creating efficiencies, but, you know, if you can, it's easy for us because we're a one ingredient product, and we know our supply chain, you know, from the planting seed all the way through. The point being, if you can do it, why not just do it?
Well, and I think there's one other point, is that we get the same kind of interest from non-celiacs, you know, people with allergies. They're in the same boat as celiacs are. They're looking for safe food. So I guess the simple answer is, when you have a very complicated supply chain through gluten-free, you learn a few things, and it's, in a sense, a little easier for companies like ours, or especially companies, to add to some of the free-from aspects. And the result of that is you get a lot better products, you get a lot more products, you get a lot more successful, and that's going to be the big test in the coming years, is which companies are going to be large enough to give you good quality and variety, as opposed to the companies that are going to be dropping off because they can't meet the standards. And I think the standards are going to change, I think, in terms of better food safety.
Thank you. So just to finish up, the 25% incidence of food allergies in celiac patients, has that increased, or is that
Yeah, so I
kind
don't
of
think we
constant?
have any real data on that. I mean, I think 25% of patients with celiac will have an intolerance. How many of those accrue allergies is also a large.
Okay. So just to get that into the microphone, Dr. Leffler said that it's a little bit unclear what percent of that 25%, what proportion are true allergies. It's not necessarily, the data is not necessarily very solid there. Okay.
I'm Sue Jennett, and I'm involved with the CCA. I also produce a Canadian Celiac podcast. I have a question both for Enjoy Life and for Mike. When I pick up a brand of something that has oats in it, and it says on the back, gluten-free oats, I would rather it said gluten-free oats from Avena or Only Oats, because there are gluten-free oats out there that I don't trust because of the testing and where they're from and the problems that there have been with them, because there's different ways to test oats. Is there any way that we could be assured that, you've told me today that your oat products have Only Oats in them. Up until now, I didn't know that.
Certification.
Well, there's certification, but when it comes to oats, I don't trust any other oats, but Only Oats, just for a series of reasons. And I'm just wondering if there could be any clarification there, because I've actually gone to the trouble going back to Only Oats and asking them if they sold the oats to that company.
Sure. It's a great question. I mean, one of the issues is what you can and cannot put on the package. When we were a much smaller company, we used to put things in parentheses so we could explain what the ingredients were. And then as we got larger, the FDA said, you can't do that. You're making up stuff. So we got it. So what we do is, because you're limited on packaging, we do call it out on our website, which we get it. It's an extra step. But we list all of our ingredients on our website. We will then, on something like oats, we will say purity protocol oats. We seldom will list who our suppliers are, because we have competitors. And we have to be careful about sharing who all of our suppliers are. But we try and be as transparent as possible on our website. I will share with you where I think we're going, and I think we're about 24 months away from it, is augmented reality, AR, is going to be the answer. Because what you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to hold your phone up in front of the product, and all the information is going to be listed while you're in the store. So we've already built that into our packaging. If people have AR apps, our packaging has the ability to tell the stories about all the ingredients. And we literally are 24 months away from that. It's built into the phones now. And so you're going to start to see that. And that'll start to provide you with those answers that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Other questions for this panel? Anyone new?
Hi, Paul. I'm Linda from Vancouver. Small companies, it's not possible for them to get certified. Is there any thought in the future how we can bring these mom and pop places and get them certified so that they can gain steam in this gluten-free world?
It's been an ongoing challenge, and when we first started with the standard with CCA, one of the big concerns was that there were a lot of small independent suppliers and manufacturers making product in various locations, and not necessarily locations that would sort of conform to good manufacturing practices. So the latest issue of the standard that's coming out, it will address that issue in terms of offering a what we call a START program for small, medium size enterprises that can take up to 2-3 years to move along in terms of continual improvement and putting processes in place that are going to recognize them as a small supplier in the beginning, but also continue to work with them to help them gain a broader certification to help them sell their products into the major grocery chains as well. Because the major grocery chains won't touch them either. So I guess it's going to depend on how they want to grow their business. You know.
So the question was, will it be cost effective for them?
Yeah, it will be very cost effective for them. In fact, if they're going to be undertaking certification in the standard we're talking about, in our gluten-free certification standard, START will be provided at no extra cost to them. It's version 3 of the standard. We have revised the standard now, so it's a 3rd generation. So it's added increased guidance on oats and grains. It's also increased guidance on testing.
So this has come from GSEP?
Correct.
Not
Correct. Part of the results that have now been incorporated into the guidance on version 3 come from a study and some research that we did with Agriculture Canada and the Canadian Grains Commission on oats and pulses.
There is one point, though, that you might keep in mind, and that's that it's getting extremely difficult for small companies to get products into any retail store, and it's going to get worse and worse because the local decision-making is now, in Canada, changed dramatically. So
Jerry, you're saying that's general to the industry. That's not specifically about the gluten-free market.
no, it's general to the industry. It's just that there used to be a lot of local store managers who could do things like that. That's becoming the rare breed, so to speak. Just isn't. It's not being done.
I'm just going to I'm going to use the power of moderator just to ask a question that I think you've been alluding to, which is what would you all project for the cost? The future cost of gluten-free products, because you have large companies with economies of scale. It's harder for small companies to get in, but it's also very stringent, and it's getting more so. And there's questions about whether it should get even more stringent than it is now. So I'm just curious what you would project for cost of products.
I don't think we don't anticipate any significant cost increases beyond the kinds of levels that we have now. I mean, I think the companies here are established and they have cost structures that are pretty straightforward. The big issue is going to be what do the retailers decide to do with the retail margins, which we have no control over.
Just to add to that, Jerry, I know a recent Mintel study in the U.S. said that products that were costing up to double, 8-10 years ago, are looking today. We're looking at approximately 20 to 25% increase over conventional products.
So the price premium's been decreasing.
Yeah.
I'm going to address it in a little bit of an expansive form, which will address why did we sell our company to Mondelez? Why are we no longer family-owned? You know, what we saw was, well, we saw a couple things. Number one, we saw that there was market opportunity, and we did see our costs going higher. And we needed to get economies of scale. And so Mondelez was able to bring that to us. Even though they didn't have dedicated gluten-free product, they had contracts with certain suppliers on which we were able to piggyback. But there was also another reason why we chose to be acquired by Mondelez. I'm a big believer in the Trojan horse theory. We thought that companies like Mondelez or General Mills or Kraft, we didn't think they were doing it properly. And we didn't think we could change them from the outside. But we thought we could change them from the inside. And so when we were acquired by Mondelez, part of the deal was they had to deal with me for a period of time. And to their credit, it's 4.5 years and I'm still there. And if you look at some of what Mondelez is doing today, for the first time ever, they have products that is certified gluten-free. They had never done that. And so we help them understand the standards of creating gluten-free product. So what you're getting is you're getting mainstream companies who understand certification, keeping the costs relatively down. You're still going to pay a premium, but it's a smaller premium. And we think it's important for companies, larger companies, to continue to go down that route.
If I could just expand on what Joel said, I mean, again, we are talking about a single ingredient product. Gluten-free oats cost more to produce than conventional oats. Don't know how to break it down much simpler than that. However, economy of scales do apply. If we look at expanding, let's even just call it the 3% of population. If everyone consumed only oats, gluten-free, purity protocol oats, that still doesn't move the needle for a company that's got Quaker Oats on the, you know, that's such a sliver, although they are part of that business, and I think the attraction to that is the percentage growth in the hot cereal segment. So if we look at this at scale, you know, at the highest retail price in Canada, I think our per serving, our oats are about 56 cents. You know, I guess I ask, you know, what else do I feed my family that's 56 cents a serving? You know, it's not just about gluten-free product, it's about, you know, the health and the healthy, nutritious part of oats in general. You know, we hope that we can bring the cost down for the community by going mainstream, and it's, you know, very much to what everybody's speaking to here, and that's about scale. How do we scale?
Okay.
I have a question.
And I think there was a question here as well. And I think that might be it unless anyone has a really burning question, but otherwise I think we'll take our questions into lunch, so go ahead.
So I just have a question for the hope for like fast service, quick service, airlines as major producers. What's the hope of you know, making sure airlines and restaurants like the Tim Hortons and Starbucks, in terms of getting some of your products, you know, into those venues or more often or more consistently? And what does it take from either our community or CCA to help you make that happen so that our people can travel and they can dine out, you know, just more options? Especially we hear from families, you know, Linda on the Facebook group, just, you know, if they're, you know, not that I want to promote McDonald's or anything, but, you know, as they're driving out and do those road trips, you know, they want to be able to stop in and not necessarily have to pack, you know, 6-10 pounds of food just in case. So
I think the answer is stay tuned would be the best way to put it. I think those that are in the industry are kind of turning our attention more and more to those types of food service activities. Food service is a big unsatisfied demand, whether it's airlines or restaurants or whatnot. It takes a different distribution chain, but I mean, we're certainly dealing with those issues all the time. We've been supplying cruise ships for 10, 12, 15 years in Disneyland and Disney World, and those opportunities are enormous. And we were just, I guess you'd just say, we're waking up to the fact, perhaps the retail market has changed. So guess what? We're going to put a lot more attention into food service. So you will find that there's some big improvements in the kinds of food service you're talking about.
Yeah, you know, we see the opportunity. Jerry mentioned Disney. Disney has always been a big supporter, and they've been great with gluten-free and food allergies. The airlines, we are seeing more and more airlines pay attention to it. Hawaiian Airlines has our product. WestJet has had our product. They're kind of off having our product for a while, and that happens with rotation. Our biggest issue is cross-contamination. So what we will not allow anyone to utilize our products outside of our wrapper. And because of cross-contamination, that education with the venues, that is difficult for us to communicate to them because they would rather serve it in bulk, and we just won't allow that. I mean, if they do, they can't use our name. So we're working in ways that that we can work with the venues. We're seeing more sports arenas carry products like ours. So the way that you can help is to keep asking for it. It's amazing how important it is, and everyone has stressed it, for you to keep requesting for this product.
Yeah.
So for us, it's really a similar discussion. I mean, the food service, you know, if you're gonna take our product and put it into a bulk bin, you know, you kind of burn it up. So Manny and I have really addressed the single serve, both from an oatmeal standpoint, but we're also working on a single serve oat milk, only oats oat milk, and a 1 liter pack size. And obviously expanding the market based on our value proposition of, only oats.
Okay, so I think we had this one more question. Did you want to go ahead? So if we can be a little efficient with the question and then the answers, and then we'll get to lunch on time.
Hopefully we can be very efficient here. First off, I'd just like to commend everybody on the panel for the work that they've actually done, because it's obvious that you have gone above and beyond what's required by Health Canada. And also, you're doing the best you can for the safety of the food that we eat. Now, the actual part of the question, the key question is, where do you people stand on co-packers? I have seen so many products that say distributed by, imported by, sold by, and my question is always, well, who really made this stuff, and where was it really made? And no offense, but some plant in Shenzhen, do I really want to eat this no matter what they say?
Well, you hit a very, I'll jump in because that's a very sensitive point for us. We do not believe that co-packing is a safe procedure. We've seen enough examples where incidental contamination, even in the best of intentions by co-packers, is you can't prevent it. Our answer to that is we don't co-pack, and we don't co-pack for anybody else. We only sell what we produce, and that's the way the company runs. So we think there should be some standards for co-packers that are as rigid as the standards that we enforce on our own production lines.
Just to add to what Jerry's saying and answer your question, we would support that exact philosophy that anybody that is certified in our program has to have their co-packers certified in the program as well. So they have to be held to the same standards that the brand is. That would include a physical audit, absolutely. Yeah, to the standard that the brand has to meet as well.
Speak to the complexity of that. We don't have the complexity as our other panelists here. We have one ingredient. Although when we acquired the business from Avena, we had to move the operations outside of Avena as well. Caused us quite the challenges, and it's strictly because we couldn't find somebody that really we could trust to do the job. So when Manny brought me on, that was my number one task, was to find out how are we going to do this. And we spent some plane tickets and we spent some travel, and we found 2 in Canada. that can do what we're doing. And it definitely affected our supply chain to where, you know, folks were running out of oats, but we weren't going to compromise. There's a trust in this brand, and that will always be there, and we will do whatever it takes to do that. And then when the time comes, when we are at size and scale, we will bring it in-house, strictly because we want to control the whole piece. So
I'll make this really quick. There's another advantage of being acquired by Mondelez is they have more money than God.
Yes, so we've noticed.
And so we took that money and we asked them, we told them we needed a new dedicated facility. We built a $35 million facility outside of Louisville that was from the ground up, so we didn't have to worry about any clean out. And you're all welcome to come. Anytime you want to take a tour of the facility, email me. We'll set it up. We're happy to be transparent and let you see how we do what we do.
So I just wanted to close by saying that what you're seeing on this panel are 3 organizations that are going beyond the call of duty. Not everybody is as committed as these folks are. They're going beyond regulatory requirements, and they're also going beyond certification requirements to achieve what they're achieving today. So I commend them, and I also, you know, would like to. We continue to work at this to bring other manufacturers, other brands up to the same standards as well. It's an ongoing battle. Thank you.
Thanks for the panelists.